Hi, everyone. My name is Ranjit Nair, and I'm the president of Stanley Black & Decker's infrastructure business. I also serve as an executive sponsor of our Asian Heritage Network Employee Resource Group, a community that encourages culture, connection, and development by embracing our Asian heritage. I'm honored to be partnering with SASE, and I'm privileged to be part of this professional development webinar series hosted by Stanley Black & Decker. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is a cornerstone of our company and a personal passion of mine. Across our organization, we firmly believe together we are more and are committed to prioritizing DEI in everything we do, between holding DEI workshops, having meaningful conversations, and pursuing ambitious goals to further drive DEI. It's fantastic to see SASE's commitment to the advancement of scientists and engineers of Asian heritage, including this dynamic webinar series that encourages your professional growth and development. Our team is looking forward to furthering our relationship with SASE, including attending this year's Women's Leadership Conference and having members of our own Stanley Black & Decker team graduate from the Top Gun Leadership Academy. Thank you to the SASE team for your partnership, and on behalf of Stanley Black & Decker, we hope you enjoy today's session.
Hey everybody, this is Parag Madawar. I'm so glad to be here with you, with all 60 of you, and I know more of you are pouring in with this special webinar that we've got with us today. But I'll get into that in a little bit. For those of you who have not been to a webinar in the past, I am Parag Madawar. I'm the Director of Professional Programs here at SASE, the Society of Asian Scientists and Engineers. This webinar and this program is part of one of the many facets of what we offer here at SASE Pro on our mission to unlock the leadership potential of Asians in STEM. The challenge that we are trying to tackle is that Asians are nearly 50% less likely to get promoted to middle management versus our non-Asian counterparts. And this creates a massive Asian leadership gap, which is really a source of untapped talent, both for the individual as well as the companies that we work for. Our research with well over 100 Asian executives leads us to believe that there are really four key common factors that Asians can struggle with. And those are lack of political and organizational savvy, cultural deference to authority, ineffective communication and listening skills, and influencing skills, and an aversion to risk-taking. Now, part of the problem is that we've got some challenges to overcome to even address these to begin with. First is even knowledge of what I've already shared with you. A lot of this is not well understood throughout the community. And so part of what we do is just some basic education as far as what the challenge is. But secondly, to actually tackle this, you have to provide the leadership training with the cultural context to provide that bridge to really understand how work is done here in the West versus how many of us may have been raised. And lastly, let's face it, Asian ERG budgets are small in many cases, and often we don't enjoy the same support, both financial as well as visibility within the organizations as many of our other ERG counterparts. And that's what it is. That's how we sit right now. So what we try to do at SASE and SASE Pro in particular is we partner with actually now well over 250 Asian ERG leaders from nearly 100 Asian ERGs across the country to create programs that we can utilize at scale across companies. And this SASE webinar is one of those. So this is a free series ongoing. If you paid to get in here, then I do not know who you paid, but I would like to figure out what happened and get our cut of that. We feature training partners and or interviews, and we do this about once a month. You can keep in touch with it on our website as well as on LinkedIn. It's really quite easily the easiest way. And now that you've joined, you'll start getting some emails from us as well as far as the upcoming ones. So today's is a conversation with Nim De Silva, and actually This is an old thumbnail, my fault. But Nim De Silva is at Stanley Black & Decker. She has participated in a number of our programs in the past, and we've gotten to know each other through the development of this workshop. So Nim has a phenomenal story that, we're super excited to have her share with us. So Nim, let me go ahead and let you steal the screen share. I'll just stop sharing, and you can share what you have.
Thank you, Parag. Let me just get myself sorted. There we go. I think you should be able to see my screen now. Yeah,
you got it.
Okay.
You got it. So actually, before I let you start, my apologies. It's just some logistics real quick. Is Nim will share some slides, share her thoughts, so forth, and then we'll do some Q&A at the end. And audience members, you are welcome to toss in Q&A questions right into the chat, thoughts that you have, some elaborations that you'd like at any point, and we'll get to those. The bulk of the session today is going to be that conversation. So Nim, sorry, go ahead. I'll hand it over again to you.
Thank you, and good afternoon to everybody that's joined and is still joining. Thank you for being here. My name is Nim De Silva. Like Parag introduced me, I'm a product manager with Stanley Black & Decker Outdoor Group, the North American product development team. Before I get into my story, I want to thank Daniela with the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion team at Stanley Black & Decker for inviting me to have this conversation. And I also would like to thank Parag, Jessica, and SASE team for having me here today. I am incredibly honored and I feel privileged to be here sharing my story with you all. And, this did take some work. If you ask me, 10 years ago, I probably would not have done this. So, I feel a little bit of a sense of accomplishment already doing this here. So before I get into my story, why am I here? That's a good question. The answer to that really is, regardless of, experiences, where we come from, our age, and what we look like, we're all human beings, and we're trying to pursue our own personal journeys of happiness, right? So my journey has been just like yours, a little bit of up and down and different pivots, but I wanted to share my story so that hopefully little things from here and there will resonate with each and every one of you, and maybe there's something that you can take away and dig in a little bit deeper and learn something out of it. So that's my hope. And that is one of the reasons why this particular statement from Dalai Lama resonates with me. I'm a practicing Buddhist. I was brought up as a Buddhist in a Buddhist family, but happiness was a very fascinating notion to me. I've struggled with clinical depression for almost 2 decades. So happiness is not something that came easy to me. I had to strive for it, fight for it, learn how to get there. So it's always been a topic of interest, just like, many folks out there, because there's a ton of research based on human happiness. And it's a very complex notion. So let us talk a little bit more about that and also explore my perspective so you can share yours as well. So looking at some of the research that's been done, if you go back a couple of decades, people connected individual happiness to a couple of different things. So this wheel of happiness, the one in blue that you're seeing, is maybe about 2 decades old, but they're very concrete factors like marriage, power, titles, having children, money, assets. These are the things that people thought would make them happy. But then again, like everything else, humans evolve, the ideas that we have evolve. So more recent research actually shows that the notion of happiness has also evolved. So I'm taking a study to compare and contrast here from 2017. This is a study called The Secret to Happiness. And this study explored, I want to say, close to 2,500 subjects from cross-cultural sample representing 8 different countries. And they explored the connection between emotional experiences and happiness. And those are the factors now they found as important to individual happiness. So if you look at the wheel on the right versus left, the wheel on right actually resonates with me a little bit better. To give you an example, just being married won't make you happy. unless you have a good relationship with your partner, right? Or, having money won't necessarily make you happy if you're sick. Because no amount of money can cure you from a terminal illness, for example. So those things, they have a deeper meaning to individual happiness. You have healthy, authentic relationships, they will make you happy and whole. You have a support network that you can rely on during times of grief or uncertainty, that will make you happy. Whereas assets and possessions can't necessarily give you that. So things are changing. But how does that relate to my story? So this is me in a nutshell. A lot of pictures. I was born in Sri Lanka at a time of conflict and war. So generally an unsafe childhood, but I was privileged to have a family that protected me and that provided me with security and a path forward. So my parents actually sent me to Australia to pursue a different life. I have one younger brother. He's also here with me in North America now. And I swear he's the only one I've ever bullied. I call that my birthright. And I'm married, I have a partner. And when I moved to Australia, I pursued my bachelor's in medical sciences. So the idea was to, pursue a career as a doctor eventually. But then during my second year at university, my mom was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. And I was always the child with big emotions, big guilt, big happiness, big sadness. So no wonder through all of that, I was diagnosed with clinical depression. So that set me on a different path, a path to rediscover myself. What would actually make me happy, and where can I align with my, what I have within me to be the best version that I could be. My mom is okay now, but that set me on a different path. So I took on a career in business upon graduation, and then went on to work in higher education, pharmaceuticals, and then industrial chemicals before joining Stanley Black & Decker in the outdoor power tools business. I went back to school to pursue a master's in sustainability because that's always been an interest for me, coming from where I come from and the background that I have, and combining science and business. That seemed like a good fit, and also fulfills the need I have to create that impact in the world. So you can see a lot of different groups that I'm part of. I have a dog that I love very much, and I have a great group of people around me and a family that supports me. So if you looked at this collage with no context, you would never guess that I have the struggles that I have. So that's why humans are complex, right? You need to dig in a little bit deeper every time you meet someone and have those authentic relationships to know somebody as a person and to know what really makes them happy. So what does this have to do with you? So what I did was I took my story. This was the hardest part for me, to be honest, taking my story and dissecting it to come up with themes that maybe each of you can relate to. Because I'm not the only child that got displaced during human conflict, right? UNICEF says there's about 43 million kids that got displaced because of human conflict just in 2022. And that number is only getting worse, unfortunately. But then, so what do you do with that, right? How did I overcome the feelings of displacement? That's what I'll share with you. And then mental health has been a big theme in my journey so far. And all of that ties into the learning journey I've had that combines my upbringing, my culture, my values, and the risks I've taken and the learning journey. So I'm going to try and reframe that so that you can see that there is a different point of view to these themes. Because once you dissect it, to me it was, then so what? What do I do with this? What's the learning? Let me share that with you too. So the very first one is environment. I think we can all agree that we're all products of our environment. However, when we move and change our environment, we find ourselves a little out of place. When that happens, people either cover or fully change themselves, trying to fit in, right? That's normal because we want to fit in. But adapting to a new environment doesn't mean that you can remove yourself from everything that makes you who you are, that shaped you so far. Because to me, personally, my intersectionality is an important part of me, which I'm not willing to give up, right? And some parts you cannot. But the impact that my environment had on me is my story to tell. So instead of hiding from it, I started looking at it as owning the narrative, because I own my story. And I share my story because it establishes me, it helps me establish genuine relationships, right? What that means is when I truly, fully bring myself to a conversation, that sets clear intentions with people because they understand my perspective. Over time, they understand why I do the things I do. And that helps people establish better relationships with me. And that also limits assumptions because human brains are conditioned to gap fill with whatever we know. So whatever you don't share, my brain's gonna assume that with something or fill that with something. It could be a stereotype that has nothing to do with you. The one example that I've ever known is what I'm gonna use to figure out what you are. And that's not gonna do you any favors. That's not gonna do them any favors because now you're misunderstanding each other. So that helps you, by sharing your story, you're going to limit assumptions too. And covering, that's a big problem. As colored people, and actually more and more professionals, regardless of what it is, we cover something about ourselves, whether, it's being a parent or the struggles we have with our mental health or the struggles we have at home or whatever it is. When we cover, you are not doing yourself any favors, and you're also doing a disservice to somebody who's in a similar position, who maybe look up to you as an example. So when you bring yourself fully to a conversation, to your community, to your workplace, you're actually setting a great example to anybody who's looking at you. And that in turn helps you be well because you're at peace now because you're not pretending. It takes the stress out of just being. So the second thing that I talked about was mental health. I'm gonna, declare that it was at early, late teens, being diagnosed with clinical depression was a big deal to me, right? But then now I know more than 19 million Americans suffer from depression yearly. So I'm not alone in it. Women are twice as likely as men to experience a major depressive episode at least once in their lifetime. And WHO actually calls this the greatest disease burden for women when compared to other diseases in their report called the Global Burden of Disease. So when I was first diagnosed with clinical depression, it took me a long time to process what that meant for me, let alone, starting to share that with anyone. The culture that I grew up in, it was a little bit taboo to talk about mental health, which is because they actually put community well-being at a higher regard than individual health and well-being. There are so many research that investigates this phenomena. It's actually quite interesting, but maybe it's a topic for another day. But what I want to tell you is this is something that we have to do more because speaking openly about mental health doesn't happen enough among families or friends. But the conflict is my upbringing as a Buddhist. In Buddhism, we hold individual health and well-being at the highest value and regard when it comes to well-being. In Buddha's words, it was arogya paramalabha and santuti paramandana, which meant health and happiness is the highest form of wealth any individual can have. So between this conflict of culture and religion, my journey to recovery was, was a lot of ups and downs. But today I've come to terms with the fact that there is a place for my illness within me, and I'm at peace with it, and I know how to live with it. And I think, and I look at it as taking charge. But it is only because I learned to ask for help, and I got help, and I kept doing the hard work to improve my, emotional regulation, self-awareness, and self-reflection skills, which takes time. So on this slide, you see that is Aristotle And in one of his books, which is Nicomachean Ethics, Book 2, he talks about having right emotion at the right time being important for lasting happiness. Or what that means is he's saying that happiness entails experiencing the correct emotions. So this is what emotional regulation looks like to me. It is not feeling positive or happy all the time, but feeling the right emotion at the right time. Doesn't mean you suppress emotions either. It means you recognize and acknowledge the emotion and leave room for it. But you don't let that emotion drive your action. Rather, your actions are driven from a place of empathy for yourself and the situation. So this is also a skill that takes time. And this is time you need to spend getting to know yourself and being kind to yourself and fully understanding yourself. And that is a skill that's helped me drown out the noise in my mind. And that's helped me live with my illness and yet to be the best version that I can be, knowing, it's right here, right now. But my work doesn't end because, as humans, we're evolving and it's a never-ending project. And the third theme I want to talk about is my learning journey. So Carl Jung, who's a Swiss psychiatrist and a psychoanalyst, says the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. What are we truly? With the values we live by, with the experiences we've had, the trauma, love, hate, knowledge, perspectives, and everything that we carry, right? Each and every one of us has a different combination of these things, and that's what makes us who we are. My learning journey has been embracing, taking risks, adapting, and accepting myself as I am. The biggest and the toughest project that I've worked on is the project of myself. And it doesn't end today. So if you meet me 10 years from now, I'll tell you how it's going once again, because I'll have to keep working on it. But through all of this, what I realized is that I need to come up with my own formula for happiness, success, power, and independence. And this will look different to each and every one of us. But what is important is understanding the building blocks. So to me, my building blocks was everything that I just talked about. So let me share my formula with you. So this is my formula. Living my values is non-negotiable for me. It is important because it is important for my health and well-being. I do not want to live in conflict where I don't get to live my values and pretend to be something else, because that does not agree with me and that does not make me happy. So it's non-negotiable. Commitment to learning is something that I've recognized as important to me. I thrive on being a student. So some days when I think about, okay, I want to be an expert on this, but then what? I want to keep learning because I realize that it's the learning that makes me happy. So I've taken risks. I've pivoted in my career when I wanted those learning opportunities. Third thing, vulnerability. I bring vulnerability to every conversation, every forum I'm in, and every community. Maybe it's not reciprocated all the time, but it doesn't matter to me because my vulnerability creates space for another person to maybe reciprocate that, use me as an ally, or build a meaningful relationship with me, have a fabulous conversation, or just, have me in their life as a resource. It doesn't matter to me if that is not reciprocated anymore, because I use that as one of my strengths now, and that makes me happy. Boundaries are important to me too, and that's non-negotiable. And learning to set boundaries has been a struggle, because once again, culturally, we're not taught how to build boundaries, because community is very intertwined. But for individual health and well-being, you need to establish healthy boundaries if you want to pursue your happiness and success. And you have to do it diplomatically. You have to be very aware of what you're doing. And that's where all of that learning journey comes in. Understanding what's important to you and being able to communicate that. That is how you set a healthy boundary, whether it's with your family or work or your friends or your community. And those are non-negotiable for me. And having the capability to listen to somebody else's opinion about your life, and knowing that having a boundary means that you're not impacted by that, because people are allowed to have opinions. Doesn't mean that you have to follow them. Power and independence to me comes from three different things. Embracing weaknesses. For years and years, I thought of myself as, sort of being weak for struggling with depression. But then I realized if I embrace it, if I create space for it and become friends with it and show it the place where it has in my life, I take the power away from it. So I had to do the work. But then by doing the work, what I've gained is more skills. So I'm not saying, depression's great. It's not. But what it's done for me is I've embraced it. And through the journey of trying to recover and trying to figure out what that means for me in the long term has given me more empathy, more insight to human well-being. And I care more about people's individual well-being because I know how that impacts me. So that is how I've embraced the weakness. I've taken power away from it. And I also set clear objectives within myself when I want to do something. I ask myself, why do you want to do it? Do you understand the risks? What would it do to you if you don't do it? Is it that important? If so, why won't you do it? Or asking somebody else when somebody tells you to do something, why am I doing it? What's the outcome? What if it goes wrong? So that's shaped by my upbringing and also my religious beliefs, because Buddhism makes you question things. So I've grown up questioning things. So that's something that I practice just to make sure that I'm strong enough to be able to take risks, calculated risks, and be okay with whatever the outcome is. So that helps me pivot. And the third and the last thing, which gives me power and independence, is impact. So impact to me does not come from power, having titles or money or being rich. Our impact individually is on the relationships we have with people, in the community that we surround ourselves with, and the workplaces. Regardless of what you do, you create impact through your actions by giving time. So I make sure, because it's important to me, I make sure that I find time to volunteer, I find time to mentor, I find time to somehow create a positive impact, because I think all of us, to different levels, want to leave a small legacy behind, which is positive impact. And you can do it regardless of what you do. So that is an important thing to me, no matter what my title is in any given job. So this is my formula for success, happiness, power, and independence, as it is today. So talk to me in 10 years, maybe I'll give you a different formula. But you can see that it's all dependent on internal factors. I'm not relying on external factors to keep me whole. That is because I understand that I have no control over what's happening out there. And I've also learned that what is happening internally and taking control of that itself is a tough thing. It takes skill, understanding, practice, and empathy. So that's how I've tied all of these things into my individual happiness. So once again, this is the wheel that I showed you at the beginning, and you can see how my formula ties into all of these little bubbles. My lifestyle choices, I have gratitude, because I do believe that I have a support system. I believe in building healthy, authentic relationships, because I do believe that makes them happy. That makes me happy. And I believe in unconditional love, not just towards other people, but towards myself, because you have to be your own biggest ally to be able to go through this journey called life. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing all of that, Nim. Really appreciate you talking through, your learning journey and so forth. I'd like to get a better understanding of, if you could share some of your actual career pivots that you've made, because you've lived in many localities, and what came about what actually happened, and from moving from Sri Lanka to Australia, back to Sri Lanka, I think, and then to Canada now. And you also made some career pivots along the way. And, this journey of learning about yourself very clearly intertwined with that. But can you say a little bit more about what that history has been?
So deciding to not pursue a career to become a doctor, that was the biggest pivot. Very difficult decision, moving into business with, as people said, no experience. But I did work while I was going through med school or pre-med at the time. And so it was more about, for me, it was about working with people. I love the challenge that came with it. But then I started connecting the dots between my scientific education and how that translates to being able to talk about a product in a different sense, on a deeper level. So that understanding and connecting the dots between my transferable skills to what I really wanted to do helped me make those pivots. So to somebody who doesn't have the context, they may look like, oh, she's been all over. But I've always made moves with that vision that this is a role where I can thrive in because I have the skills. Maybe it doesn't look like it right now, but I can talk to a product because I understand what it's made of, because I'm a chemist by nature, right? So that's what's helped me make those pivots. And some of them I would say is circumstantial. I moved back to Sri Lanka hoping that, I can spend time with family, and maybe that's a long-term plan. But life happens, and I realized that I wanted more things from life, more opportunities. So that made me pivot again. And North America, like Canada, was a good, another new adventure that me and my partner embarked on.
I see. I got you. Are there, a lot of times within our cultures, we have a fear of change. Because too many uncontrollables, especially for folks who have immigrated all the way over here, because there's a lot of risk. There's, first generation immigrants, including yourself, have, risked a lot to come over here to begin with. And I know certainly for my parents, they wanted me to stick to a defined career path to just minimize that risk. And so making that switch from, med school, because all of us are told to go to med school, of course, making that switch to now into marketing and so forth. What's been your mental approach for even a new role? Because you moved when you joined Stanley, you were your prior job wasn't exactly identical, right? So how have you learned to approach that change?
So that's a great question, Parag. And one of the things that that was ingrained in my brain growing up in a Buddhist family is change is the only constant. So I know deep down that what it is today is not going to be tomorrow. That's true about everything that we use, that we see ourselves. So change to me is not something that's scary. So it's never been. So I embrace change. The changes that I've made, like I said, I ask the questions from myself. What are the risks? What is going to change? And so if so, how would that change impact me? And so you have to take that internal inventory and that, muscle that you have in terms of, okay, how much can I adapt? And how would that look like for me? So you do that work internally before you embark on any new, venture, adventure, whatever you want to call it. But you do that with understanding that risk too. So to me, it was always, yes, change is scary, but change is inevitable. So do I create that change, or do I wait until that change is thrown upon me? So
I see.
That's kind of been my approach.
And have you found that, out of curiosity, have you found that if you stick around one place too long, that you end up stagnating then? Because you've had a life now of a lot of change in a pretty short period of time. Or is the sticking in one place sounding really appealing right now?
No, I think I'm still that person I do appreciate change, because I think, that's what makes life interesting, right? And even if you do end up taking a risk that doesn't work out for you, I think there's a lesson to be learned. So you have to take it that way, because I think most of the time what we regret about would be the things that you don't do. Or, I coulda, shoulda, woulda. I do not want to be that person, so I will try out things. And if I feel like I'm bored, I will do something actively about it to change that. Is that what you do?
Yeah, it is. I've made a lot of changes within my career. I spent 20 years at Procter & Gamble, and I was fortunate in that they actively have you move jobs every 2 to 3 years. And I was coached to change one of three things at a time, and that would be the specific type of job, the location, and the business unit. So the three, you should never change more than one of them at a time. And toward the end of my career, I changed all three, just because I craved just the newness. And after, 4.5, 5 years or so, I would stagnate and I would actually become counterproductive. So I learned that I have to,
Yeah,
go find the change
familiar.
before it finds me. Yeah. So, and actually at this point in this current role with SASE Pro, I am approaching the longest I've been in one assignment. So, who knows? I'm joking, Jessica and Con, if you guys are listening. I'm here. I'm good. but yeah, one of the other things that you meant, that your very first slide about happiness, right? It was absolutely programmed into me that happiness, and I'd say not happiness. I don't think my parents talked about happiness. They talked about success, and success absolutely had to do with, your title and your salary and your, all of that type of external, not that we strove to own multiple homes or anything like that, but it was a reflection of success. But that was what you were striving toward, not happiness. So in your family, has that also, did your parents preach to you about success versus happiness, or were you always geared toward happiness?
I think there was both, but there was definitely that same cultural conditioning to, our parents would do everything and anything to make us successful, right? But then there was also that upbringing part, the religion, the exposure that we had. To me, it was like, you can't be successful if you're unhappy. Being successful and unhappy doesn't sound like a great combination, right? At what cost? That's when I think that's what my epiphany was when I was diagnosed. To me, it was like, oh, I can keep doing this just because I can, and I'm going to end up unhappy. So what am I going to do after? If I don't do this now, if I don't do what's necessary for my wellness and happiness, knowing the challenges that I have that's being put in front of me, if I'm going to keep pursuing this notion of success, that might not be for me. So I have to create my own path of success, which sounds harder, right? It is. And I know my parents were not on board because they were like, what are you trying to do? But then I think they also had to let me figure it out, because it was my journey. At the end of the day, if I'm taking responsibility, then, I won't go back to them and say, you made me do this, right? Because it was my decisions, and they trusted me enough to make those decisions from that.
Can you share a little bit more about, if you're willing, my apologies, but can you share a little bit about where you were when that epiphany, or when you were struggling with that? Like, where were you? Was this while you were in med school, in pre-med in undergrad, or? Okay.
That's when I definitely realized that I was struggling. My mental health was in jeopardy, and it had to do with not just what I was going through with my mother's illness, but it was personality traits. I was always a perfectionist growing up, big feelings. Like I said, I was the big feeling child. So very critical of everything I would do. I had to be the best at things. I had to change that, because that was not serving me. Because when I started failing, with my mental health struggles, I was like, well, that's never happened to me. What do I do now? I've never asked for help up until that point. I had to learn to ask for help. I had to learn to be okay with being imperfect. And then I realized I was never perfect, although I had this notion in my head. And today I'm one of those people, I can walk into a room knowing nothing, and I'm perfectly comfortable.
That's hard. That is very, very hard. And I know at least a lot of Asian Americans struggle with that, especially with, they say that studies show that, women, for example, when they're putting in for a job, they're going to make sure that they can tick off every single box that's in the application of the requirements, whereas men will look at it and say, good enough, I'll apply. Now, that's a little bit of an oversimplification, but we also know that Asian Americans tend to do this more than non-Asians, and Asian women will be kind of the double whammy. So, often we are overqualified for even something relative to our peers for putting in for a new position. So, yeah. Well, I mean, as you've made career pivots, have you found that to be true as well?
No, that is true. That is true. No matter, that I told you, I'm still working on my individual project here. So I'm not there by any means, but I've come a long way. So that is something that I actually talk about during my mentor relationships. I actually leadership coach with Spelman College, Atlanta. Those are colored women in that school, so young women, and we try to tackle that from get-go, because I think we realize that we have imposter syndrome too far out in our careers. So there's a lot of lost opportunities that we leave behind. So something I always preach to them, which I'm still working on, obviously, but I understand that that's a problem. Like, you have to overcome your fear of not knowing and thinking that you're not enough, or all of those things that you just kind of explained. But there's also, as early to mid-career professionals like myself, I think we also have a job to lead the way and also change the system, because there are systemic changes that needs to happen for them to succeed. So it's a two-pronged approach for me.
Actually, even what you're doing right now was a little bit of a risk, right? So share a little bit more about your journey, even with doing this. Like, how did you approach this? Did you say yes right away, or were you like,
no?
Okay.
I did not say yes right away. So when Daniela approached me, and she was like, oh, you should speak. And I said, no, this is a fireside chat with a C-suite executive. I'm a mid-career professional. I can help you find someone. I'll help you with the event. And Daniel was like, no, you share your story. And then you kind of came on board. And from then on, the pressure was more about, how do I dissect my story? I lived it. And I urge some of you to try doing what I did. It was not easy. It's not easy to step out of your story and really try to, draw out those lessons. It's not easy to relive some of the trauma, because when I was going through all of this, I was like, oh, had you asked me a couple of years ago, I would have said, no way, I'm not going to talk about this. But realizing that I've come so far that I'm comfortable telling a whole bunch of people about what I've been through, that itself was a realization. But then it was also about, what does this do to other people or for other people? Because that's important to me. That's the impact part of what I was talking about. So if any part of my story had the slightest impact on anybody that attended, that's mission accomplished for me, right? And I think I also told you when we first met, I took the risk because I also want to, use the platform so that people see that younger career professional, colored women, we have a different viewpoint to share. We lead from a different place, and our perspective can be different. So I hope that, I do justice so that somebody else can have that opportunity.
Yeah, no, this was a little bit different than what we've done in the past, and I thought it was a neat opportunity as well. So, again, thank you, or congrats on pulling it together. It is hard. It is hard to step outside of yourself and try and what are those concrete lessons? How can I pull this? Because I imagine what you had on those slides isn't something that you've had on a slide deck with you for the last 10 years, right? It wasn't you haven't really had that playbook. You've really had to crystallize it, and I'm guessing you crystallized different portions of it at different times, but perhaps this was the first time pulling all of those together. Am I on track a little bit there?
No, you're right, because I think some of it was clearer than others, for sure, right? Some of it was, okay, I'm telling you the story, but so what? So pulling that out and trying to relate that to a group of people that don't know me, has no context, has no idea who this person is. Why would I trust her, right? Because I don't come with a rank or anything like that. I'm just, a normal person in front of you who's been through a different journey. So trying to make that connection, I think was hard with certain parts. But if I were to ask you what your biggest 3 themes were in your life, would you have 3 themes?
Oh, you were supposed to prep me for this. Okay, so I'm gonna come up with some. Okay. First off is for me is I have to be learning at all times. I have to be learning, otherwise I get bored. I just get super bored, and when I get bored, I get counterproductive. I think I mentioned that actually, but I have to be learning something new, something different. So that is definitely one. Number 2 is I have to have fun with it. And I think I'm a pretty good fit for SASE because I'm a little bit goofy, and we are a bit goofy, but we care. We care. We are super passionate about what we do, but we have fun with it. And I learned somewhere in my career that if I'm not having fun, then too I'm just not as productive. I'm not as engaged. And in many cases, in several cases, there were spots in my career where my desire to have fun with my presentations probably was career limiting. Because it didn't fit the mold of what those who were 2-3 levels above me were expecting. But my peers loved me. The folks I was trying to lead loved me, and that was more important to me. And so, but I knew that. I knew that, and it was I wouldn't even say it's calculated risk as much as like screw it. Let it be. And I only knew of one manager above me who did the same thing, and not unsurprisingly, he's no longer there either. But that would be number 2. We've learned that we always have to have odd numbers because it's more interesting. So it's always 3 or 5 or 7 or 9. It's never 2, 4, 8, 6, and 8. No. By the way, so I can't think of number 3 at the moment. When in doubt, flip a coin.
That's an interesting one.
Yeah. When in doubt, because rarely is a decision that important. Sometimes it's just like, just flip a coin, move forward, just move, just do something. But along the flipping a coin route is if you legitimately have 2 choices in front of you. Mentally, you probably have a preference. And while that coin's in the air, you're going to find yourself rooting for a certain face of that coin to show up. And so at that point, you don't even have to look at the coin. But it kind of gives you the freedom, the license to overtly say what it is that you want. So when I left Proctor, took a voluntary separation package 7 years ago without a plan at all. I had no plan. It was, I had a week to decide whether or not I was actually going to do it. And more or less the last day, I flipped a coin. And I knew the way I wanted it to land. I knew exactly which way I wanted it to land. And in a way, it was freeing in that, the coin, and it actually did land that way. So I can blame the universe, right? But but it was very freeing. So
that's an interesting notion. I've never thought about it like that, because I'm always the What are the pros? What are the cons? Like, okay.
Oh yeah, no, I had a full decision analysis put together with, all the different criteria and the different, it's a whole, rate it 1 to 10, and then the importance 1 to 10, multiply that and across the 2 different options, and invariably you end up with the exact same number on the 2 options. So it's unhelpful from that standpoint. but
we're glad I think, like as somebody said on the chat, we're glad you flipped that coin. So, there's that.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah.
And I wonder if anybody had any questions.
If anybody has any questions about any of this, please do go ahead and, pop it into the chat. One of the things that I thought was also interesting, Nim, is, you mentioned about Buddhism teaching us about, the point is happiness, right? A lot of Eastern religions actually are very good about talking about the spiritual health, the mental health, emotional health, and harmony, right? However, it's, at least within Asian Americans, the one who've come over to North America, I don't think we always do a great job of embodying that, or stressing that and so forth. And I found this seems like a little bit of a disconnect. I don't know if you found the same, or do you have any thoughts around that? I guess
it's a risk, that vulnerability that we're talking about, right? Not everybody is comfortable sharing that inner most deepest, darkest secrets, as they would call it. But for me, I'm at a point where I can make fun of my illness, right? I'm that comfortable. So I find that that comes from a place where I'm like, no, there's nothing wrong with, being sick, because obviously coming from a medical background and all of that, I understand this is just like being physically ill. So why are you so worried about somebody finding out? Because regardless of what the mental health challenge is, you need help. If you need help, you need to ask for it, first of all, and recognize that you have a problem. And if your community that is surrounding you right now is not the right place to find that help, you need to find a different community. But the bottom line is you need help, and that needs to come from within, that acceptance, right? And I think my religion did help me, because that Buddhist vision does not say anything about, you're any less if you struggle with something. The whole vision is complex. And that is one of the reasons why, I kind of have to figure out this idea of you're your own biggest help. That's another word of Buddha that says, attahiyatano nato. That means you have to help yourself first before you can help anybody else. So that did come from that religious upbringing. But the conflict is when you go to the community, though, the same culture would say, whoa, let's not talk about that, because people might think less of you.
Right.
But it's evolving. Like as generations evolve, I think it is getting better. I think we need to keep that momentum going, because there's so much suffering in the world. So your trauma is no less than anybody else's trauma. So you don't have to wear it as a badge. I don't think trauma makes us stronger. We make ourselves stronger. So you need to remember that, right? I'm not asking for a medal for going through my trauma, but I do deserve something for dragging myself out of it. And so does the next person, right?
Yeah, I think the scarcity mentality that we've had, that our families have had growing up where there's, so many people, or there's a lack of resources, relatively speaking, or whatnot, has kind of strayed us as a community, as a culture, potentially away from some of those foundational beliefs. And I think that some of the beauty that we have over here in the Western space is that we don't have those same societal level of challenges. There are more resources. There is a social safety net. There is the ability to say, hey, you know what? I want to be happy. That is the goal. And, the ability to even state that is a bit of a privilege relative to, I know certainly my grandfather or my great-grandfather, they were too busy trying to feed themselves, right? To think about happiness. Like, what? So I think that's part of it as well. And so part of the gifts that are that we've gotten by coming here is that we have that opportunity, I think, to actually explore it and examine it to that level. And in doing so, actually going back to our roots, because our roots actually give us a lot of insights, as you've shared and as you've learned and so forth. So I think one of the questions, from Daniela, so Daniela's setting you up here, Nim. So can you share any insights on how leaders can foster a culture of happiness and well-being among their teams?
One thing is the covering portion, right? I can tell you a couple of things. One of the things that I'm going to pull out from my story is covering. So if leaders also bring their full selves to their workplace, their teams, and be open about their struggles, what goes on behind the scenes, right? Bring themselves to work as a person before their title. That does create a sense of trust and safety. And that also helps build a feeling of inclusion, right? And then having empathy in every interaction that you have. People don't necessarily want to make mistakes at work, right? So most of the time it's systemic problems that you have. You fix the system, often that resolves the problem. So being a leader, approaching every situation from a place of empathy and genuine curiosity to whether it's a situation or your different teammates, I think that fosters a culture of happiness, and people want to interact more that way. So I do believe that is top down. So thank you, Daniela, for asking that question.
I like that one. I like that, both of them. But I think it is incumbent on the leaders to show their warts as well, right? And to not project an air of perfection or inadvertently project that that's the requirement by any means. And by being present and sharing the struggles that they are having as well helps make them relatable, and also helps open that door for your team to feel like they can share as well. I like that a lot. I think that's a great tip. And then leading with the empathy, of course, as well. First, getting to the core of the intent, or what the individual was trying to do, versus specifically the number, right? I think is a critical one. So I agree with you. Those are two great pieces of advice. So I don't know if you and Daniela, if Daniela set that up with you in advance, but nice job.
Well, I wish she had, because I would have come up with more data and I've had okay, let's go, 5 points.
Well, with that, we are close to the end here. So I'm going to share my screen again, and let me screen 2, and let me hide. Okay, so with that, Nim, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for putting all of this together. We do have a feedback survey for folks. You scroll down, there are three questions, I think, or there are 4, 3 questions. There are 3 questions. Please scroll down and answer all of those. And you will be able to get a recording of today's presentation on this website, saseconnect.org/webinar. It'll probably be up within a week. Jessica, our Zoom lead here, will be sending out the email along with the link at that time. We also have the next webinar coming up. So Discover Your Ikigai, Walking Boldly in Your Purpose, with Christina Farinacci Roberts, a trainer that we connected with. She is a former New York City educator and principal, and she is Korean and Italian. So it took me a while to figure that out too as well. We had a great conversation about it. Actually, we'll have a great conversation about this here in another month. She actually shared with me how she felt like her Korean upbringing and her Italian upbringing were actually really similar, which I would not have guessed. We will chat with her, and Dow is our sponsor for the next series. But for these 6 that just closed, Stanley Black & Decker, thank you so much for supporting SASE and supporting the Asians at your organization as well as the Asians at the rest of ours. So you can find us on the web. You can follow us on LinkedIn. We've got programs throughout the year. We are, of course, coming to the close of 2023, but our 2024 events will be coming up soon. And if your company isn't engaged with us already, just reach out to us at pro@saseconnect.org. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Nim. Really appreciate it. And that's all.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you.